The gate agent made the announcement at 6:47 in the morning, and every single person in Terminal C heard it at the same time and reacted the same way. They looked up from their phones, processed the words, and then went back to being miserable. Flight 2284 to Denver. Delayed 2 hours. Mechanical issue. I had a connecting flight in Denver. Had. Past tense. Because 2 hours meant I was going to miss it. I stood there with my carry-on and a cup of airport coffee that had already gone cold, and thought about all the things I was supposed to be doing in Portland. By noon, a site walkthrough with a client I had been rescheduling for 6 weeks. A building I had spent 4 months designing that I had never seen in person. Gone. All of it, because of a mechanical issue on a Tuesday morning in Chicago. I found a seat near the window and called my office. Left a message for Diane, because she never answered before 9. Sent 2 emails. Checked the airline app like it was going to tell me something different than what the gate agent had just said, with her own mouth. It did not. The terminal filled slowly. People claimed armrests and outlet spots the way they do when everyone suddenly has the same 2 hours to kill. A family with a toddler set up camp across from me. A man in a navy suit fell asleep sitting upright, which I respected. I opened my laptop and tried to work on the revisions for the Portland project, but I kept reading the same paragraph without seeing it. That was when I noticed her. She was 2 rows over, sitting sideways in her seat with her legs pulled up, reading a paperback book. Not a phone, an actual book with a cracked spine, and a page curled from being held open too long. She had dark hair pulled back loosely, and wore a gray sweater that looked like it belonged to someone taller. She was underlining something with a pencil. She had brought a pencil to the airport. I did not stare. I looked, and then I looked away, and then I looked back once more because something about the whole picture was specific enough to be interesting. Most people in airports look like they are enduring the place. She looked like she had found a way to be somewhere else entirely. I went back to my laptop. About 20 minutes passed. I had managed to get through the paragraph for real this time and had moved on to the next one when I heard a small sound, like something hitting the floor. I glanced over and saw her pencil rolling away from her seat, crossing the gap between us and stopping near my foot. I picked it up and held it out toward her. She looked at me first, then at the pencil, then back at me. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was straightforward, not warm exactly, but not cold either, just direct. "Good book?" I asked, because apparently I had decided to do that. She held it up so I could see the cover. It was a book about urban planning. "That is not what I expected," I said. "What did you expect?" I did not have a good answer for that. "I don't know. Something with a lighthouse on the cover." Her expression shifted just slightly, like she found that worth maybe 1/3 of a smile. "I don't read those." She went back to her book. I went back to my laptop. That should have been the end of it, except the gate agent came on again and said the delay had been extended to 3 hours. Possibly more, and the whole terminal groaned as one organism. And I looked over because I could not help it, and she was looking at me at the same moment. We both made the same face. She almost smiled again. This time it got a little further. "3rd time this month," she said. She was not really talking to me specifically, more like speaking out loud in my direction. "This airline? Airports in general." She set the book down in her lap. "I travel for work. It used to feel exciting. Now it mostly feels like waiting." "What do you do?" She paused, not like she was deciding whether to answer, more like she was deciding how to. "Structural assessment. I evaluate buildings, old ones, mostly, whether they're safe, whether they can be saved, whether someone's renovation plan is going to hold up or fall apart in 10 years. I looked at her for a second. "I'm an architect." Her eyes came up fully then, the first time she had given me her complete attention. "Are you?" 6 years, mostly residential and mixed use. I'm going to Portland to see a project I designed. She tilted her head slightly. What kind of project? A converted textile mill. 1920s building. 8 units, kept most of the original structure. A timber frame? Yeah. She nodded slowly the way someone does when they are running calculations behind their eyes. Those can be tricky with insulation retrofits. We ran into that. Spray foam between the joists, vapor barrier, issue in the 3rd floor. How'd you resolve it? Rigid board on the interior side of the exterior wall and accepted some thermal bridging at the connections. She looked at me with something that was not quite approval and not quite skepticism. Something in between that felt more honest than either. That works, she said. Not perfect, but it works. That's more or less what my engineer said. That got me a real response. Brief, contained, but real. Her name was Audrey. Audrey Voss. She said it the same way she said everything else. Plainly and without decoration, like a fact you could look up later if you wanted to verify it. The gate agent announced another extension. The man in the navy suit woke up, looked around in confusion, and fell back asleep. The toddler across from us reached a point of no return and began crying in a sustained, committed way. Audrey and I both looked over, then looked back at each other. You want to find somewhere quieter? She said. We walked to a cafe near the end of the terminal that had 2 seats open at a counter by the window. The kind of airport seating that pretends to be a real place. She ordered a black coffee. I ordered the same, even though I usually take mine with a little cream, because I did not feel like explaining that right then. We talked for 2 hours. Not the kind of talking you do to fill time. The kind where you keep going, because the other person keeps saying things that are worth responding to. She had strong opinions about post-tension concrete and the laziness of glass curtain wall facades, and what the word sustainable actually meant, versus what developers used it to mean. I disagreed with her on 2 of those things and told her so. And she argued back without getting defensive, which was more interesting than if she had just agreed. At some point, I told her about the Portland client, how he had pushed back on every structural choice I made that honored the original building, how he kept asking if we could just gut it and start fresh inside. How I had spent more time defending the bones of a 100-year-old mill than I had actually spent designing the new parts. Audrey listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "People do that. They want the story of the old building without the responsibility of it." Exactly. I looked at her. You get that. It's basically my entire job, she said. Telling people what they have is worth keeping. When our flight was finally called, we walked to the gate together without discussing whether we would. On the plane, our seats were not near each other. She was in 14C and I was in 22A. I found that out when I stepped aside at the boarding door so she could check her pass, and she said, 22A is a middle seat, by the way, without looking up. I looked at my pass. It was, "How did you know that?" She was already moving down the jetway. I noticed when you pulled it out, at the counter. I stood there for a second, then followed her. I spent most of the flight trying to work and not doing a very good job of it. When we landed in Denver, I had 40 minutes before my connection, which was a miracle. I was walking fast through the terminal when I passed her standing at a departures board and almost kept going, because I did not want to make the moment into something it was not. I stopped anyway. My connection is tight, I said. Then you should go, she said. I wanted to say something useful. I could not think of what that would be. It was a good conversation, I said instead. She looked at me directly. It was. I went to catch my flight. I made it to Portland with 6 minutes to spare. The site walkthrough went well. The mill was better in person than in the drawings, which almost never happens. My client shook my hand and said he was glad we had kept the original beams, and I nodded and smiled and did not say anything about the 4 months of arguing it had taken to get to that point. But on the flight home that evening, somewhere over Wyoming, I kept thinking about Denver, about the departures board, about how I had said it was a good conversation, and she had said it was, and then I had walked away. I had not asked for her number. I had not given her mine. I did not know her last name at that point. I had not been paying enough attention, or I had been paying too much attention to the wrong things. Voss. She had said her name was Audrey Voss. I remembered that. That was something. For about 3 days, I did nothing with that information, because there was nothing reasonable to do with it. You cannot search for someone named Audrey Voss and feel good about yourself. The world is full of people. She could be anywhere. We had talked in an airport, and that was a complete thing that had happened and was over. I went back to work. I drafted 2 new proposals. I sat through a zoning meeting that went 40 minutes longer than it needed to. I had dinner with my friend Patrick on Thursday, and he asked how I was doing, and I said fine and meant it mostly. But on Friday morning, I was walking past the architectural bookshop on Halstead, the one I go into maybe twice a year, and I stopped. I went inside. I wandered back to the section on building preservation and structural history, and I found 3 books that had anything to do with structural assessment methodology. I stood there reading the backs of them and felt a little ridiculous. Then I bought one anyway and left. That same afternoon I got an email. It came to my professional address through my firm's contact page, which is public. The subject line said, "Thermal bridging question, timber frame." I opened it. It was from Audrey Voss. She wrote that she had a project in her current workload, a 1930s warehouse conversion in Milwaukee. And the engineer on the project had proposed a similar approach to what I had described on the plane. She wanted to know if I had documented how the vapor issue had actually performed over the first winter, whether I had noticed any moisture accumulation at the joist connections. It was a completely professional email. Specific, technical, no preamble. I read it twice. Then I wrote back. I answered her question with actual detail because I did have the performance data from that winter, and it was useful information. I also said it was good to hear from her. She replied within an hour. More technical questions. I answered them. Then I asked about the Milwaukee building. What era? What the existing envelope looked like. She described it, and I had thoughts, and we went back and forth for a while. Then she wrote, "I almost didn't send this. Thought it might seem strange." I wrote back. "It was a good reason to reach out." She replied, "It was a convenient reason. There's a difference." I stared at that for a little while. Then I typed, "Are you in Chicago often?" She replied, "Next Thursday. Site visit in Wicker Park." I said, "I know a good place for coffee near there, if you have time before or after." There was a pause, longer than her usual response time. Then she wrote, "After. Around 4. I sent her the name of the place and the address. She sent back, "See you then." I put my phone down and looked at my desk for a moment. Then I picked it up again and looked at the exchange from the beginning, because I wanted to see how we had gotten from thermal bridging to Thursday at 4. It seemed fast, and it also seemed like it had taken 2 weeks, which was both true. Thursday came, and I was there before her. I ordered water and tried not to look at the door every 30 seconds, and did not succeed. She came in at 4:08, still wearing her work clothes, a dark blazer and slacks, with her bag over one shoulder. She spotted me before I could decide what expression to make. "Hi," she said, sitting down across from me. "Hi, how's the Portland project?" "Done. Client loves it now." "Of course he does." She said it without any edge, just matter-of-factly. They always do once they can see it. We ordered coffee. We talked about the Milwaukee project. Then about a preservation case in Detroit she had testified on. Then about a building in my neighborhood I had walked past 100 times, without knowing it was structurally compromised. She told me what to look for. I told her I would probably spend the whole walk home staring at cornices now. "You should," she said. "Most people don't look up. You look up." She glanced at her coffee cup. "Occupational habit." Or just how you are? She did not answer that, but she did not disagree either. We stayed for almost 2 hours. The coffee place started to fill with the early dinner crowd, and we were still sitting there. And at some point, I realized the conversation had moved completely away from buildings, and was now somewhere else entirely. Her father was an engineer. She had grown up going to job sites. She had wanted to be a painter for about 6 months in college, before she realized what she actually loved was the inside of walls. Not what's on them, she said. What's behind them? What's holding them up? That's a very specific thing to love. Most honest things are specific. I watched her say it, the way she said things, plainly, without softening them for the room. I had noticed it in the airport, but it was clearer now. She did not perform. She just was. When we finally stood up to leave, we walked out onto the sidewalk, and the evening was cool, and the street was lit, and I did not want the thing to be over yet. I also did not know how to say that in a way that did not sound like too much. Same time next week? I said instead. She looked at me with that calibrating expression she had. I'm not in Chicago next week. The week after, I might be. Let me know. She nodded once. Then she walked to her car, and I walked to the L, and I thought about the word might for the entire ride home. She texted me 8 days later. Just an address and a time. No explanation. I recognized the neighborhood. I showed up. This continued for 6 weeks. Coffee on Thursdays when she was in the city. Once a dinner when the coffee turned into another 2 hours, and neither of us suggested stopping. Once a walk along the river because the evening was too good to waste on sitting still. We talked about work and buildings and cities, and occasionally other things. She was precise and a little guarded, and occasionally funny, in a way that surprised me each time, like finding a room in a house you thought you knew the whole layout of. I did not push. With Audrey, pushing felt wrong in some fundamental way, the way you do not push on an old wall, without understanding what it is holding up first. But I was thinking about her more than made sense for a professional acquaintance. And I was pretty sure she knew that. And I was pretty sure it was mutual. And I also had no idea what to do with any of it. Then one Thursday, in November, she texted me a different kind of message. Can't make it tonight. Something came up. Sorry. I said no problem and meant it. I went home and cooked dinner and watched something I don't remember. The next week, she did not reach out. I waited until Wednesday and then texted asking if she was in the city. She replied, not this week. Busy stretch. Okay. The week after that, nothing. I sat with that for a few days. I went over everything. The last dinner, the walk by the river, the last real conversation, and I could not find the thing I had done wrong. Nothing felt off. But then nothing had felt off with the departures board in Denver, either. And I had walked away from that fine. I did not reach out again. I told myself she knew where I was. She had always been the one to set the timing. I respected that. I would keep respecting it. What I actually felt was something closer to the specific disappointment of a building that turns out to have been as less structurally sound than it looked from the outside. You assess it, you see the potential, you start caring about what it could be, and then you find the thing in the wall. 3 weeks went by. I went back to normal life, which was fine. Good, even. I was busy. I got a new project, a school gymnasium retrofit in Evanston. Interesting structural challenges. I had dinner with friends. I ran 6 miles on a Saturday morning and felt like a person who had things together. Then she called me. Not a text, a call, at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, which she had never done before. I picked up and said her name, and there was a pause, and she said, I need to tell you something. There was something in her voice I had not heard before. Not upset, not cold. More like someone who had rehearsed what they were going to say and was now abandoning the script. Okay, I said. When? I emailed you, she said. About the thermal bridging question. Yeah, that wasn't the real reason. I sat down. I did not plan to. My legs just found the nearest chair. What do you mean? I mean, I had already looked you up before I wrote. After Denver, I found your firm online, which wasn't difficult, and I read about some of your projects. I had the thermal question because the Milwaukee project is real, but I could have asked my own engineer. I emailed you because I wanted a reason to. I did not say anything. And the Thursday meetings, she continued. The first few times I was actually in the city for site visits. But I rescheduled 2 of them. I came to Chicago specifically to see you, and told myself it was convenient because I had other things to do here too. But that was not entirely true. The room was quiet. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. She took a breath. Because I disappeared on you, and you deserved better than that. And because if there's going to be anything real here, it can't start from something I built on a partial truth. I looked at the wall across from me. Old plaster, original to the building, hairline crack near the window frame, I kept meaning to patch. You engineered the introduction? I said. Yes. And then kept engineering the access. Yes. And then you pulled back. Because I scared myself, she said. Because I do that. When things start to feel like more than I planned for. There was a long silence. I was not angry, exactly. I was trying to understand what I was. The airport in Chicago, her sitting sideways reading that book, the pencil rolling to my foot. The urban planning textbook I had not expected. I had thought that was all chance. The small specific thing that made one morning different from every other morning. It had not been chance. The pencil, I said. A pause. Yes. You dropped it on purpose. I moved it off the seat. I wasn't sure you'd pick it up, but you hoped. She did not answer that in words. She did not have to. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the street was ordinary. Someone walking a dog. A car waiting for a light. Why me specifically? I asked. Before the airport. When you looked me up, I came across an interview you did, she said. A small architecture publication, 2 years ago. You talked about the difference between renovating a building and restoring one. You said renovation is about the people who'll use it next, and restoration is about what the building already knows about itself. I remembered saying that. I had not expected anyone to remember it. That's a strange reason to engineer an airport meeting, I said. I know. It's also a very specific thing to notice. Most honest things are specific, she said quietly. I heard my own words come back to me in her voice. I stood at the window for a long moment. I'm not fine with all of it, I said. I need you to know that clearly. I know. The pencil thing in particular is going to need some time. That's fair. But you told me when you didn't have to. And you didn't dress it up. She was quiet. I want to have an actual conversation about this, I said. In person. Not to resolve everything tonight, just to actually talk about it. Okay, she said. Her voice was steadier now, but I could still hear the thing underneath it. Whatever it cost her to make that call. Coffee? I said. Thursday? There was a pause. Thursday, she said. I got there first again, same place, counter by the window. She came in at 4:05 this time, 3 minutes earlier than the first time, and I noticed that, because I was the kind of person who noticed things like that about her now. She sat down and did not say anything right away. Neither did I. We ordered coffee, and for a few minutes we just let the room be around us. Then I said, "Tell me about the interview." "What specifically?" She looked at her cup, and then back at me. "You said most architects think about buildings the way developers do. As a problem to be solved and a product to be delivered. But you think about them the way a doctor thinks about a patient. You want to know the history before you start fixing anything." I had said something close to that. I had not thought anyone outside of a handful of readers had paid attention. "That sounded like someone I wanted to know," she said. "So you arranged it." "I arranged a first moment," she said carefully. "What happened after was not arranged. The Thursday visits. I rescheduled twice," she admitted. "The rest were real. And the Milwaukee project. Completely real. The question was real. I just had another reason for asking. I thought about the 6 weeks. The conversations that had kept going longer than they needed to. The walk by the river. The way she had told me I should look up at buildings more. Here's what I keep coming back to, I said. If you had just found some regular way to reach out, I would have met you. I would have had coffee with you. None of the engineering was necessary. She was quiet for a moment. I know that now. But you didn't then. I don't usually let people in, she said. I plan instead. It's the same impulse. If I control the introduction, I control the risk. And how'd that work out? She almost smiled. Poorly. You still scared yourself anyway. Yes, and now you're here. And now I'm here, she said. I picked up my coffee and set it down again without drinking it. I want to be honest with you about something too. She waited. When you disappeared, I went over everything. Tried to find what I had done. I couldn't, which was almost worse. Because then I had no idea what I was dealing with. That was my fault, she said, without hedging it. Yeah. I paused. I don't want to be in something where I don't know what I'm dealing with. Not because I need to control it, because I need to be able to trust what I'm reading. She held my eyes. I understand that. Do you? Yes, she said. Because I'm the same way. I just found a worse way to handle it. Outside the window, the street was doing its early evening thing. People heading somewhere. A couple arguing over something small. A kid on a bike threading through a gap in the sidewalk. How do you want to do this? I asked. She considered that for a moment. Really considered it. Like we did in the airport, she said finally. Before I had a plan. When it was just a conversation. That landed somewhere that felt right. I can do that, I said. She reached into her bag and pulled out something and set it on the counter between us. A pencil. Old, slightly worn, with a small eraser that had been used down to almost nothing. From the airport, she said. I looked at it. You kept it. You gave it back to me. You dropped it on purpose. I still kept it, she said. I did not pick it up right away. I looked at it for a moment, sitting there between our coffee cups on the counter, this small ordinary object with a whole story behind it that I had not known I was part of. Then I picked it up and held it between my fingers and looked at her. Next Thursday, I said. Next Thursday, she said. We sat there a while longer, until the place got too crowded and we had to leave. Outside on the sidewalk, we stood for a moment in that particular way, where the conversation has ended. But neither person has quite decided to walk away. Look up, she said, and nodded toward the building across the street. I looked. 3rd floor. Ornate cornice. Original ironwork almost invisible under decades of paint. I never would have seen that, I said. You would have eventually, she said. You just needed someone to show you where. She said goodbye and walked toward the parking garage. I watched her go, and then turned back toward the L, and somewhere between the sidewalk and the train platform. I decided that, whatever this was, I was in it with both eyes open. Not because everything had been clean, or easy, or what I thought it was, but because she had stood at the edge of something, and chosen to tell me the truth, instead of the better story. That meant something. Maybe more than the pencil. Maybe more than all of it. I took the train home in the dark. Watching the city lights move past the window, thinking about old buildings. And what it means to decide something is worth keeping.